the 90s, jungle producers pushed the limits with minimal gear and somehow created some of the most forward-thinking music that still sounds fresh today. I'm 𝗙𝗙𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪 and I've been producing jungle and drum and bass music for over 25 years on respected labels such as Hospital and Metalheadz. A lot of what I do today is rooted in those early techniques. In this video, I'm sharing 10 tricks from that era that helped elevate my sound and how you can use them to add vibe, grit, and movement to your own tracks. Let's dive in. Before we start, all the samples I'll be using today is from my Vaults sample pack, which is a collection of samples from my personal archive of over 25 years. You can grab the Vaults sample pack down in the links below. Here's the drum breaks I'll be using today. Here's some other cool breaks from the pack. Included are also some bass sounds I recorded from my Virus B synth. I think we'll be using this low pass Reese today. Here's some more processed bass sounds from the pack. Here's some lush pad sounds. I think we'll use this pad today. Here's a choir pad that we can use on top of the track. Finally, a classic vocal. If you downloaded packs back in the 90s, you'd recognize this sample.
This generation rules the nation with version.
You can learn more about Vaults down in the links below. Here's that main aim break. So if you want that true 90s sound, it goes without saying that you gotta program and chop up your breaks in MIDI. Back in the 90s, we didn't have cool warping algorithms like we do in Ableton. Producers either used samplers or tracking software. And by chopping up breaks this way, it just sounds more fresh and natural. You don't get those weird artifacts you would when you warp it in Ableton. And also, I think you get more control when you program your notes in MIDI. Now with this break, I want to pitch it up by 2 semitones to give it a more high-pitched break sound. So let's go into the audio and pitch it by 2. And you'll notice when I pitch by 2, the sample becomes shorter because when you pitch it up, the sample is played faster. So to get it to fit properly along 2 bars, you're gonna have to stretch it in Ableton. Now I've stretched it here already. Now it's a perfect 2 bar. Now listen to it. Notice the artifacts in the audio. There's something just not right about how the break sounds now that it's stretched. Now compared to over here, where I've chopped up the break using the Rex files provided in Vaults. The breaks are provided in Rex and WAV format. So I've imported the Rex and each slice is placed along each pad in drum rack. So now I'm able to program the break in MIDI without having to stretch the audio. And listen to how natural this sounds. Compared to the audio. You can even go through the different warping algorithms and you'll notice it still does no justice. Even if you change the grain size, it doesn't help. Repitching it doesn't make sense because over here, we want it on a specific pitch. And then there's Complex Pro. So there's no way getting around it. If you have a break that isn't matching your tempo, you have to stretch it and then you'll get warping algorithms, which is why chopping it up as MIDI is the best way to go. And here's a chopped up sequence I did with the MIDI. And using the pitch knob, and this is found in my Strangest Slicing preset. Learn more in the links below. No matter how I pitch it, it still sounds natural. Now, samplers and computers from the 90s have limited sample rate and bit depth, which affects the quality and tone of your audio. You can think of the sample rate as the number of times an audio is being measured per second. So lower sample rates will have reduced high frequencies, while the bit rate or bit depth is the amount of detail in each measurement. Essentially, when you reduce these parameters, you get a more lo-fi and crunchy sound. Most samplers from the 90s had a maximum bit rate of 12, and they have a pretty normal and high sample rate. But because these samplers had limited hard drive and disk space, they would often sample at lower bit rate and sample rates to conserve disk space so they can sample more material. Now, there are also producers using the Atari and producing on the 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘 software. The Atari had a limited bit depth of 8, so that gives it that crunchy old school sound. Easy way to achieve this in Ableton and other DAWs is to bring in a bit reduction or sample reduction plugin. The Redux plugin in Ableton is great. Just bring the bit rate down to 8. And then play with the sample rate until you get something pleasurable. I love how bringing it down to 13 or 11K makes it sound tinny like a tin can. Try playing with lower bit rates. You notice at very low bit rates, there's very little information. It almost sounds like glitch. So adjust those parameters to taste. Now, a popular plugin as of late to emulate this sound is the Amigo sampler, which emulates the Atari sound card. So you have 8 bits of depth, and then you can reduce the sample rate here. So we're going to be using this sampler in this track to achieve this sound today. I also love some of the other parameters which we'll be using, especially great for jungle production. Remember, this is what gave the music of that era its unique sound. So you want to stay true, you got to emulate it with these tools. The next important trick from the 90s is snare rolls and stutters of varying degrees. Try stuttering a snare at different intervals and also trying different snares of the aim break. Remember, the aim break is a recording of a live drummer, so each snare has different nuances. Here's the aim snare playing a 16th note stutter, 32nd note stutter. You can even go as fast as 64th of a note. Or play with triplets. This is super funky. I love how Sully does it. Here's the same snare roll using different snares of the aim break. So choosing the right snare is very important. An important step is to use volume or velocity modulation. So here I'm going from low to high velocity. And here's another one where I'm going from high to low velocity. Try experimenting, going down and up. Here's the previous 16th note stutter. Here's another trick, shorten the notes. Makes it sound more stuttery. Next important trick for snare rolls is to use pitch bend modulation. And going up. Try mixing and matching. Here I'm using a ramped mode to change the pitch. So a lot of cool musical things you can do with the aim break. Here's an aim sequence, putting it all together. The next effect used a lot in the 90s is the flanger. Especially flanging drums, aim breaks, and the snares can give you a really cool and musical effect. You can easily achieve this 90s effect by pulling the phaser flanger effect in Ableton. Just make sure instead of using faster frequencies, which make it hover really fast, I tend to use slower rates at like 0.9 or 0.11. So then the flanging is more gradual. In amount, I choose around 27%. Anything below, I think 40 works. I just find at higher amounts, and you can start to get that stereo depth. Now I want it to sound more mono. So around there sounds good. And then the time parameter is very important in the flanger. So at higher rates, you get this robotic or metallic sound. And at lower time values, you get it to sound like it's going through a tube. You know when you blow air through like a long tube, you get that sound? And then around, in the middle, around 5 to 10 milliseconds, you get that almost classic flanging sound. Play with the feedback. The higher the feedback, the more intense that flanging sound. I've heard Sully use it super high. He's the inspiration behind a lot of the effects in this video, so shouts out to him. He would sample the Amen break at very high flanging feedback, cut, resample it, and chop it up to almost make it sound musical. And actually, 𝗙𝗘𝗘𝗘 did this a lot too. I think he was the pioneer of this effect, especially as his pseudonym Studio Pressure. Here I've resampled the Amen snare playing the flanger. Then I chopped up and resequenced each slice. As you can see, you can use it almost as a musical instrument. Now, if you're using Amiga sampler, there's a built-in parameter called phase, and if you modulate or automate the value of this phase, you'll get a similar effect. Here's a snare roll sequence I wrote. Automating that phase parameter, now we have this. Sounds especially cool when you add some delay and reverb. I believe 𝗙𝗛𝗘𝗘 did this in his remix of Omni Trio's Renegade Snares. So try adding a flanger to Amen stutter rolls, makes it sound real cool. The next iconic technique is time stretching samples beyond their normal length. Time stretching essentially slices audio into tiny grains, then it repeats, overlaps, or spaces these grains out to change the length without changing the pitch. And for that 90s sound, that's how you get that choppy, metallic sound. If you have your Amen break in Ableton's drum rack, an easy way to do this is to take that slice and then make it longer. Just make sure you have the warping algorithm enabled. And then choose the between tones or texture. I find either of these gives you the time stretching parameters. It's the grain size you want to play with. Smaller values give you that metallic robotic sound. You can also do it in audio. Try it on vocal samples as well. This is iconic in the 90s. In Ableton, just take your sample, hover over the right end, holding shift, you get this little stretching icon. You can just stretch it. And it's all about that grain size to get that kind of robotic chopped up sound. Larger grain sizes make it sound more like an echo. Finding a happy medium will get this sound, which was used by 𝗙𝗘𝗘𝗘 on the Amen break. Here it is on the Amen break. 𝗙𝗛𝗘𝗘𝗙𝗢𝗙𝗢𝗙. Now, if you're using Amigo, the time stretching sounds especially good. Just make sure you have the stretch option enabled, and you're gonna have to modulate the length, which is how long you're stretching the sample, the cycle, which is the length of the grains or size of the grains. So you can automate these two parameters. You can get like metallic and almost musical sounding snares. Check this out. And then over here, I had a longer just time stretch snare. Love how the time stretching sounds on Amigo. The next trick is very simple. It's about using glide on pads and strings. So here's that choir pad from the Vault sample pack. Now this is sampled, so there's only one note I want to use around here. So we can use this loop parameter in Ableton to loop this section. I'm using the crossfade here so there's no clicks. Now you get a long sustained note. Now just pop over into the filter tab under voices on the bottom right. This is the number of voices that can be played at the same time. Now we just want one voice to be played at the same time, so just set it to 1. Over into the pitch section. Just turn on glide. You can use portamento or glide. Portamento just re-triggers the sample at the start every time you play a new note, where a glide continues where you left off on that sample. Now 300 milliseconds is a nice and slow glide time for that old school feel. If you want a more faster feel, just go with your vibe. The next simple but common effect from the 80s is to use a trance gate or gate effect or stutter effect on your pads, strings, and vocals. Simple way to do this is to pull in auto pan in Ableton, set the amount to 100, set the phase to 0%, and then play with the rate, as well as the shape, for that stutter sound. Now, if you want more control and you want to make your stutters more rhythmic, I find it's better to automate the gain or volume, such as in utility. So I pulled in the utility effect and I'm going to automate the gain just using a ramp going like that. So now we get that galloping rhythm that is synonymous to the 90s, especially in Euro dance. And all you have to do is just copy this and paste it through the pattern. And here's my pad. Of course, if you have neat tools like Shaper Box, you can do it in a more elegant manner like this. I like that there's a smooth option, so you have hard corners. You can smooth it out so it doesn't click. Especially sounds good when you add reverb. You can even change the rate. The next really cool trick, I'm not sure if this is from the 90s or early Y2K, but modulating the pitch of a string, pad, or flute sound between the root and its 7th note. And we did this recently in my Grime Bleep tutorial. If you want to see that video, check this video up here. You can also grab the preset for free. Essentially, the trick is you're using an LFO over here to modulate the coarse tuning of your sound. So up here, it's 7 semitones up, and down here, it's playing the root note. So playing at low rates, you get this. But playing at fast rates, you get that grime stab. And Sully uses this trick in his track Work. So if you go into LFO, it's modulating that coarse tuning over here. If you go into the modulation matrix, you can see the LFO is modulating it by 7 semitones. The way Sully does it, he does it to the actual sample. So luckily in Serum 2, you can choose the sampler mode. And here's that pad from the Vault sample pack. It already has that nice old school feel to it. But if we pull it into this sampler, it's now modulating using this LFO. Gives it this really unique sound. Sully says it sounds like Japanese music because it's using the pentatonic scale. And here's a recreation of Sully's Work melody. The next trick I learned from the 90s is extreme EQing, especially on breaks and amens. I learned this from Paradox's track Curse or Coincidence, where he boosts key frequencies extremely to make the snare sound resonant. And then he has either a distortion or a saturation effect after it to make it sound nice and warm. So here's that amen break. And then we're gonna boost a key frequency here. The trick is you're gonna have to dial the frequency until you hear this squeaky resonant sound. Sometimes one is not enough. You may have to employ a second one at the very same frequency. You hear how this snare here? It almost pops. Without it, that snare is popping because we're boosting that resonant frequency. And then I added saturator after, and this rounds it out. Almost makes the snare sound musical. Notice that specific snare is more resonant. So again, you gotta use the right snare in the amen break. Also finding the right frequency. Say if we didn't have the right frequency, that wouldn't be right. It wouldn't get you the same sound, but it might give you something pleasurable still. Like that 719 sounds really good too. So why don't we boost them both there? And that sounds very nice. So you gotta dial and find really cool frequencies. Don't forget, there's also the option of using a notch EQ, which does the opposite. It removes key frequencies. Now putting it all together, let's see how it sounds. It might be extreme, but let's see. This effect is especially useful when chopping up breaks. So I have two layers of the amen break, one without the EQ and one with the EQ. And for one, I'm doing a filter slide at the end of the sequence, so that adds a nice movement at the end as well. But however here, notice I'm chopping between the amen. I'm simply taking the pattern and just moving it down to the EQ'd amen. And by doing that, you can get a cool call and response. So let's check it out. Right? So really cool. Okay, the last and final trick, and this is a quick one and it goes without saying, don't only play samples in forward, but reverse your samples. So if you have the amen sample in your sampler, simply you can take that slice, right click it, and reverse the sample. Or with a Amiga sampler, there's a parameter to automate and switch the sample as a reverse sample. And reverses are especially good when introducing a new drum or making a drum edit, something like this. That little reverse snare swoops into the break. Not to mention, take a sound such as a snare or a percussive sound, add tons of reverb, and then reverse it. We call this reversed reverb. These are great as little transition or riser sounds. So we can use that together in this little drum edit over here. Adds a nice swoop and keeps it natural because it all comes from the same break. Just a few more things to show you before we show the full track. I have this little shaker here, especially useful to add more energy and crunch on top of the break. Things like that is great to give that jungle feel. And this time I'm using Samplex, which is a cool plugin to add some bit reduction. Finally, I have the bass line here, which mirrors the pad melody. And remember, all the samples I'm using today, including the breaks, the pads, the vocals, the bass, and the stabs, are from my Vaults sample pack. You can grab that pack down in the links below. All right, now that you have the top 10 tricks from the 90s, let's hear the track in full. Oh yeah, and we got some jungle. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed watching my top 10 tricks from the 90s era of jungle and drum and bass. Comment down below and let me know what tricks I missed and you want to see in future videos. Remember, you can use these tricks in other genres as well. I encourage you guys to explore and experiment. If you guys want to support this channel directly, you can check out deviantaudio.com for sample packs, preset packs, and Ableton kits to help you along your journey. Once again, all the samples I've used today are from my Vault sample pack, which is a collection of all my legacy samples of over 25 years ago. You can use them today in your own tracks. You can learn more down in the links below. To see more videos about jungle music production, check this playlist up here. To learn how to arrange drum and bass, check this playlist up here. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay creative and peace out.